It's The Executive Edge with Sue Firth. The podcast that gives you an edge in life and business with practical skills that you can apply to achieve and maintain success.
Welcome everyone to this week's episode of The Executive Edge. Now this is the podcast for skills in life and business, and today I have a really interesting guest. This is Andres Klaric. It is such a pleasure, Andres. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue.
Well, I'm grateful because the topic is actually quite unusual from the point of view that we obviously talk to our target market who are execs, and there are very good reasons why they get stuck with all sorts of situations, one of which is often if they have to talk about lending or borrowing, and that's what we're actually going to talk about today. But specifically, let's talk about you first of all. Tell us a bit more about you.
Well, Sue, I was born in the U.S., but I was raised my entire life up until I was 18 in Bolivia. I grew up in La Paz and then moved to the U.S. when I was 18. I started my first job in the U.S. was a car salesman. I paid for college selling cars at a dealership in Northern Virginia, and then I spent 10 years on Wall Street. I was an investor in tech and business services, and along the way, I also had a pit stop in business school. Went to Harvard for my MBA. That's where I met my co-founder almost 10 years ago now. We stayed in touch, and at the beginning of the pandemic, I started texting back to him, kind of started getting that entrepreneurial bug that I think a lot of people go through, but not everyone acts on it. So I decided to go and act on it and kind of convince him to join for the ride. He was already, he was a repeat founder. So that helps to not make the same set of mistakes that a rookie one like me would make. And we started first as a direct-to-consumer lending shop. And within a few months of launching that business, we realized that the banks, credit unions, finance companies to which we were selling and packaging loans for were far more interested in the technology that we were using. So at that kind of crossroads, they started asking us, "Hey guys, what type of tech are you using? Introduce us to your vendors, please. We're running a RFP, request for proposal, and we're trying to buy new software, and we love what you guys do." And then we realized that our direct-to-consumer business actually had opened a market that was more business to business, and we said to ourselves, like, "Hey, like, should we actually switch the direction of the company and start selling software?" So.
Before you go any further, if you don't mind, because there's a couple of bits in there which are fascinating. First of all, I think, if I may, the whole experience on Wall Street is really fascinating because that's fast, furious. You learn, you are grasping all sorts of stuff, but you're also getting super stressed. Tell me for 30 seconds about that first before you tell me what it ultimately did, because I sense that it's done a lot for you.
I mean, Wall Street pretty much shapes your work ethic, and you go in knowingly to do so, right? You know that you're going to be there at the very least 2 years, right? And right. I do think, and at least when I went there, this was the beginning of the 2010s, right? At that point, tech was kind of more in the rearview mirror, and kind of approaching at a great speed, but I would say Wall Street was kind of the job that a lot of folks in my kind of cohort in school wanted to go to, right? So I got lucky. Wow. I got a job at an investment bank, and I knew that I had heard, and I knew that I was aware that the hours were going to be grilling, but I also thought, hey, the average person works 40, 50 hours a week here in the US. A banker probably works over 100 or more when you're on a very busy deal. So I thought to myself, I'm going to learn in a year or two what I would learn in 4 to 5 years elsewhere.
Exactly. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah, because it's so compact. It's so, it's such a, it's almost a learning by drowning. I mean, it really is. It's a pretty intense experience. Quite a lot of people burn out, as they do on the trading floor over here, which is one of the reasons why I was asking you just to unpack that a bit, because I think just in itself, it's quite an interesting experience.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first 6 months are honestly, like, thank God that you're young at that age and like you have the energy. It's and you basically know nothing, right? Like you go in there and they train you. It's not that they just throw you into the bullpen, but they kind of do, right? Because you kind of learn a little bit about Excel and like just a few things, but then like once you start like working on deals, that's kind of where you learn. And I think it builds a lot of character, right? I would say the dealership built a lot of character to deal with rejection. And when I was a car salesman, and the banking days just tested the limits of my stamina. And I think that
Fantastic.
whenever like I need to go heads down, get it done, I know that there's
that
never
you can
such,
do it, don't
yeah,
you?
yeah, there's never such thing of like, it's not going to be able to be get done. I know that like I just caffeinate myself a little bit. I just focus and no, you can go through walls, right? And that's what the
And you
banking
can
days.
deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also you turn
And
into
I,
perfectionists. Like just the problem with not the problem, banking, like even periods, double spaces, they turn you into the most perfectionist of perfectionists. And that in itself, I think that it stays with you. I mean, to this day, I the way you write an email and things like that, it's very different.
yeah, I hear
Mm,
you, but
mm,
I also realize that what you're saying is very true, that actually it develops quite a lot of personal skills, individual skills,
mm.
people skills, if you like, but also life skills, because what you learn for life is, the only person who's going to get me anywhere is me.
Yeah.
The only person who's going to get my legs out of bed and actually be able to do these hours under this level of stress, which I know they probably wouldn't have called it that, but
Mm,
scrutiny, stroke,
yeah.
success is me. So I do think that builds a great deal of, can I loosely call it character, even if that seems like a gross generalization for everything that you've actually learned all about yourself. And you will have learned that really at a relatively early age in comparison with,
Mm.
say, many execs who start their own businesses and they're still doing it 30, 40 years later. So you connect with your, if you like, your founding partner. Was he reluctant or was he interested in your whole idea, especially around COVID times? So how did you find
Yeah.
that?
He was in the middle of exiting his prior business, so I caught him at a unique time, right? I actually, the first question was obviously when you're starting to start a business, the first thing you do is kind of, let's, instead of me having to figure out everything, let's ask the folks that have already done it, right? So yeah, we already had the prior relationship, right? So we knew each other. I approached him and I said, hey, I'm thinking about this ideas. And I kind of showed him a pitch deck, right? I was going to apply for like, I think there was a competition, a pitch deck competition, the Harvard alumni kind of throw every year, and I showed him the deck. He said like the deck is a disaster, but the idea is pretty good. So, and
There's
and
nothing like feedback, is there?
yeah,
Crikey.
he just, and then I noticed that something I had sparked some curiosity in his eyes, right? And I think he was just evaluating where to go, what to do after this business. So I think he wanted to take a couple months off, kind of enjoy what he had done and accomplish. And I thought, and he thought, well, this is pretty a unique opportunity too. So we did like the
Absolutely.
typical founder dating type of thing, but kind of like an informal way, right? I think I won the best presentation or something like that in that like the Crouch Choice in that competition, and
Well done.
then we started kind of refining the idea and kind of and in parallel I had launched a website. I had already kind of validated the market pull for that. So at some point it clicked on me that like everything that he was asking, it seemed that he was interested. And I asked him, hey, well, why don't you just join me? Why don't we just do this together, right? And of course, like you set the ground rules, kind of splitting of equity. Uh, you have what in business school they teach us, like the team launch, right? Like you launch as an organization, you kind of you kind of set the values of how you work together, kind of what you want out of this. And we had a shake of hands. Of course, you kind of need to put everything in the legal frameworks for everyone to be on the record.
Comfortable.
And we raised our pre-seed round like pretty soon after that. So because the
Wow.
business in itself had a little bit of traction to show. So that's kind of like the quick on it.
And I think what I'm fascinated with is essentially really it was in an unusual market because the loan market is well known to be that domain of banks, of these
Yeah.
bigger institutions that have far too much, paperwork, far too many processes, and you walked in as a tech or you walked in with this software and said, look,
Yeah.
there's a better way to do this. I mean, that in itself means you knew what you were doing, you knew how to improve it, but you had the bravery to say as much, which is quite something to
Yeah.
say to some of the big guys,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I fell in love with the problem, right? Like I think that's something that you hear a lot from founders, right? I did not become obsessed with the solution. I became obsessed with like the problem of why is it that like the lenders need to do all of this the way that they do it, right? Like how can we solve this? And the first solution was on the direct to consumer side, kind of like more experiential for the borrower. But then we realized that a lot of the root cause was more on the infrastructure, the tech infrastructure that the lender had. So it's one of those things, that epiphany of like you started trying to solve it from one angle. In reality, it is much more foundational. And I think that at least as an immigrant, problem solving something for banks is something that I find dear to my heart, right? Like my parents were immigrants. My dad came here to America first. He was sending us money, and like when he were us money, we will go pick it up from a bank in Bolivia. So I always thought of banks as positive members of society. So
Yes.
like
Good
so so
point.
for me, so for me, helping banks be more efficient and definitively help every borrower out there just really excited me.
And I love the idea because I think, like I say, we've developed an almost institutional dislike for
Mm,
certain aspects that come
mm,
with large organizations, not just personally to
mm,
banks, but
mm.
the the hoops we have to go through, the
Yeah.
paperwork that we have to complete, the validation of who we are. And,
Mm,
even with the best will in the world, if you think you're doing incredibly well and it says that on paper, it never seems to quite feel enough. Or
yes.
rather, it's not the criteria they're looking for this particular type of loan. So, what, before we say what your solution is, because I
Mm,
sense that that's what's behind the whole development
mm.
of the software, the Fuse, the site that you've got, but what else did you find were the biggest struggles that people had, whether it was lenders or borrowers? Is it being able to credit check or whatever an
Yeah.
individual? What is it really?
It is the friction that it takes to get to a yes no. Like it's binary,
Right.
right? Like people want to know if they're going to get a loan or not. And borrowers want to know if that borrower, sorry, and lenders want to know if that borrower it's high intent or not,
Okay.
right? So
Mm,
it,
mm.
it, it the for it's a game of speed, right? And this what that borrower is trying to find out is am I approved, and what is the type of what is the process that I need to follow. The getting to the yes is as it needs to be as quick as possible because people want that certainty. And once they get the yes, the quality of the offer needs to stand the test of verifications, right? So that the lender wants to say with confidence, yes, these are your terms, and this is all we need to confirm, and this is kind of how easy it's going to be for you to confirm, so that both parties are in alignment, right? And the up until this point, the technology was not there, right? Like for example, API connections like for verifications of income, identity, all of that. We're not as solid like 15, 20 years ago, right? So
Right.
it's not that the lenders were doing it wrong. It's just that the technology wasn't there yet, right? Like cloud infrastructure was not there in terms of like storing data. Like SaaS as we know it for like a lot of the solutions was not there, right? Everything was kind of on-prem. On-prem is kind of like software, kind of the same way that if you remember in the 90s, you will buy a CD and you will install Windows 95 or something now you can update software in much better fashion. So a lot of things kind of had to work to be at the point in which you can actually approve and fund a loan in the same day, right? Like
Got
and
you.
provide a magical experience, and also make it in such a way that not only the big banks can access this type of software, but also kind of like smaller players, so that everyone kind of is in an equal playing field to play that game of speed, right? Like so that everyone has a Ferrari, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. I love the thought though, because like I've said already, I think, I've approached big organizations, big banks, and actually, strictly speaking, mortgage companies in order to be able to secure a mortgage. And I felt that they've put me through so many hoops and loops that it's really made me feel like a pretty crap person by the time I've finished with all of that. And I know I'm not.
Yeah.
But it's just criteria. And unfortunately, in my case, age was definitely an issue because there's only so many years left for me to pay a mortgage off. So I think sometimes you get so severely put off, you think, I'll just do this another way. Now, if that's possible, that's what you tend to do. But if you need big money because you want it to be able to invest in your business, again, that's one of the issues that you think, well, I want to make success. I need to make progress. And it can be super frustrating if you keep meeting this. Now, are there any other issues apart from I love this shorthand of getting to yes. I think that's really great. That's a great strap line, by the way. But, but are there any other issues that people find, whether as a borrower or as a lender? Is it mostly that software hoop that you have to go to validate, or is there anything else that tends to trip us up?
It's really lowering the cost of the operational cost for the lender, right? Like, if you lower it, if you think about it this way, today, like the heavy manual process that lenders have in making you go through this experience creates barriers, right? Because it's expensive for them to kind of process enough applications because they just don't have enough headcount, enough capacity to process application. In essence, like because their acquisition costs are high, they can only say yes to a limit of people. If you lower the acquisition costs for them, that means that the marginal borrower, the person that today is being told no because, hey, like I just don't have the capacity to actually process your application, actually gets a shot at being processed. If you get processed, there's a higher chance that you get said yes. And if you lower that cost, that means that more credit is issued. Definitionally, that means like the multiplier effect of loans is known, right? In general, like loans are pretty positive things, right? Like you mentioned a mortgage, but if you think a business loan or a student loan or credit, just like working capital credit for inventory, all of that helps the economy, right? So giving banks and lenders of all kinds the ability to kind of lower that cost of acquisition is super important.
Yeah, that sounds fab. And this is very definitely the reason why when we first connected, I loved this idea of what you referred to as next generation loan system. So clearly, as you, and can I characterize this, sat there and worked out what you didn't like about the current process and worked out what you could do about it. Did you just immediately know what it was then that the tech needed to improve this? Or did you work on it for years? What did you do?
There's a balance, right? Like it's very important to get lucky with the market, right? Like I think a lot of founders kind of get obsessed with the solution, and that's why I think it's important to find the problem that like a lot of people have, meaning a very large market with the same problem, rather than trying to find a problem for the solution, right? So at first as mentioned, like I was obsessed with the problem itself of like why was it that the certain type categories of loans took so much time. So I try to solve it through the consumer side, kind of creating the experience. But and coming to that realization really, really helped a ton that like it was actually the infrastructure where the real opportunity is. And in having that ability to like just cut your losses, so to speak, we realize, hey, like it's not really on the consumer side. The real pool of the market, the fast moving water, so to speak, was in the B2B side. Was a tough decision, but it was the right decision.
Right. And at one stage, I think you yourself were offered a VC, or somebody actually said to you, okay, we'll give you money, or we'll launch this, or we'll take it off you. What did you want to do?
We raised over $10 million of capital, right? Like, and it's been an amazing journey, right? Like the ability we have almost I would say, almost over like 30 employees today. It's a heavily technical operation. We're very proud of what we built, but like we know that there's a ton of work ahead of us, and the reality is our partners are are super excited for what we're building and how we are helping them. And I think the years ahead are going to be even more exciting. We're just enjoying the ride.
I think it sounds amazing and very well done. So who's your typical client? Who do you want to introduce yourselves to as the listeners?
In general, it's banks, credit unions, finance companies. We are consumer lenders are a very common partner of ours. We started heavy originally on the auto space, but now we diversify into other consumer categories and commercial. And it in essence is lenders that are obsessed with automation, right? That understand the value of automation and the ability and how that affects not only their operational leverage, but also their customer service, right? It's not automation for the sake of automation, but it's automation with a mission, right? Being able to grow and provide the same, if not better, quality of customer service, being able to run more efficient operations, and ultimately just say yes to that marginal borrower that today is being told no because just the costs on the current systems are kind of preclude them from doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. I think that's the reason why I was writing something down there. I was just thinking essentially what you're fixing is speed, because then people are able to get to yes. The efficiency of that, because they're able to lend that much more proportionately and that many more times because of the reduced cost in the processing of that application. Yeah. And therefore, by default, it makes it cheaper in order for that lender to be able to do this. So, these are big win-wins for them.
Yeah, no, it's huge for them. One of the things that we did too was democratizing type of. Usually, these systems were heavily focused on engineering changes, so you could actually just change it as an engineer in the background. But the business teams kind of felt frustrated because a lot of the stuff that had to be changed in the system were more like business rules, but they lived in the code world. So what we did is hey, let's actually move all of this stuff, if not everything, to a world in which is low code, no code, meaning I am not technical, my co-founder is technical, right? So when we were doing the direct to consumer, at the very beginning, I was pretty frustrated because I needed to change things and I had to ask him to do everything, right? So I couldn't really collaborate. And then he started kind of spinning out solutions that will allow me to be a contributor and actually change things. So that creates agility in the system too, right? And it's also cheaper, right? An engineer is far more expensive than someone like me that is not technical but can actually make those changes, right? And it's better for the system too, right? The engineers do more strategic work instead of just tactical stuff all day long, and the business teams can actually do things without necessarily having to explain all the context to an engineer, right? Because sometimes they're not business people. So that alleviates a lot of that inherent tension between both parties.
But I find it really fascinating that you've managed to make all of these improvements and all of this change, and with 30 people in such a short period of time, because you were talking, if I heard correctly, that this was only just pre-COVID.
We started in late 2020, right? So it's almost 4 years now. Yeah.
I mean, I'm smiling only because I'm quietly thinking I'm doing something wrong, because I've been in business a long time and I wouldn't say I'm anywhere near this level.
No. I mean, it's still a startup, right? It comes with all its growing pace and everything. But yeah, we every once in a while we should pause and be grateful for the opportunities. We feel very honored, and my co-founder and I obviously we need to get a lot of stuff done still, but it's beautiful to be at this stage and being able to provide an opportunity for all the young folks to work with us, and we're super committed for them to really make the best out of the years that they work with us, and for our partners it's a huge vote of confidence when someone chooses a startup over a company has been around for 30 years. And we don't take it lightly, right? It's something that we wake up every day and we know that we owe them only the best.
Nonetheless, Andres, I think it's a brilliant story. And I think it's got elements to it which pretty much everybody who's listening would be able to relate to, because they will appreciate the fact that it's grit, it's determination. It's going through the tough stuff and still coming out of the other end. It's believing in yourself well enough. I mean, if you hadn't approached your partner, you give them credit to your partner, and I hear that, and thank you. But nonetheless, if you hadn't worked out what that that really key proposition could be. And like he said to you, well, the pitch is crap, but the idea is a good one, so I thought this was great. But nonetheless, the idea is a good one. You had the idea. So, very well done indeed. Now, the website, or as I understand it, is it the software that's called Fuse?
Yeah, the software is called Fuse, right? Like we have a legal entity name that it's kind of more random, but yeah, the brand is Fuse.
Okay. And so if anybody listening actually thought, wow, this is actually quite interesting, where would they go? I mean, who would they approach? Yourself?
Yeah, I mean, they can approach me via LinkedIn. I've had great mentors through my career. So whenever I can pay it forward, I'll do it gladly. And as far as the website for the company, that is fusefinance.com, right? Like it is very oriented to lenders. So I would describe it as a snoozer for anyone else that is not interested in software for lenders. But we also kind of have a blog and kind of explaining what we do as a whole, right? And those are kind of the best ways to get in touch with us.
Brilliant. And thank you again for coming on the show, because it's been fab listening to you and listening to your story. And I really wish you well, honestly. It's just brilliant.
Thank you, Sue.
That was Andres there, and I think he did a lovely job. What I really found was fascinating was not only his time on Wall Street, but also the difference that made to him. And amazing that he came from Bolivia, but also he was partly the process of car sales. I mean, it's such a disparate difference, isn't it, to then going into the lending market. And it's a fascinating story. I think he would be fascinating and motivational to almost anybody listening, really. But also to go into the loan and lending sector and deliver something that's going to make a marked difference to that playing field is really good. It's a very innovative approach, and clearly his other co-founder has the knowledge to help. So between the two of them, they've made a brilliant job. Now, we'll be putting all of their information out with the podcast notes, so do look out for that. And we do have some interesting people on the show, don't we? So take care, everybody, and I will be in touch very soon. Bye for now.